All right, all right. Hello, hello, hello. Welcome to another episode of One and Pure's Corner podcast. Sorry, I'm getting my platforms mixed up. One and Pure's podcast. And today, sorry if I'm looking at both, at two cameras going on here. So, but today, I will be reading. Well, let's start off with first. Happy holidays. Hope everybody is safe and staying warm and social distancing and everything like that. I know with the holidays and being cooped up in the house for it's been 6 months, 7 months, 2 years, I don't know. It gets a little restless, but I hope you guys are being safe and knowing that just push a little longer, we'll be okay. I hope everybody had a good Thanksgiving as well. I know these holidays seem, at least for me, they seem to go by so fast. I don't know if it's like it's already January, but I digress. But as you guys know, I have a book out called Tajiri, and it is on Apple Podcast, excuse me, Apple Books, Google Play, Amazon, and Kindle. And I decided to do um, an audiobook. If you're like me, you like to move while you're doing stuff. You don't want to like be boggled down by a book. Sometimes you want to listen while you move. So I figured, what better way to do it than an audio? And what I'm talking about is on the book, which is here. Tajiri, that's me. When my hair is done, that's me. And it's all the conversation and the truth. And I don't just mean the truth they taught you in your history class. It's about 180 pages or so. I wanted to make it a little bit smaller, but the way it came out kind of just worked. And this really dives into politics, voting, living in America, history, things of that nature. So I kind of dive into different aspects of what's going on, and I always say before each episode that when I put out this book, it was never meant to, you know, offend anybody or hurt anybody. It's just my views on the truth or, what I felt should be talked about. And as always, living in this life of being an entrepreneur, you have to be on social media, even though it's crazy sometimes. But you can find me on Instagram, Twitter, Facebook, Snapchat, all that jazz at Lana and Pure. One name, same photos, you can find me everywhere. And as well as I had, when I mentioned last week when I did my episode, I said I had a surprise, which is two surprises. One, I'll be doing a live recording so you can see me. Instead of just listening to me, you can actually see me read it live. Since I'm going to be reading the last two chapters of the book. It's ready, it's been what, 12 weeks? So we're getting there. So I decided to do a little surprise for the last two chapters versus just, recording it and uploading it. I felt it better to, read it live. So that was a surprise. And the second surprise is I have a couple projects coming out because I am, as well as a published author, producer, DJ, and music engineer. So I have a project coming out which you can find all my music on SoundCloud, on my IG, um, Apple, Spotify, Google Play, all that jazz. So you can find that there. So stay tuned for that. That will be coming out next year, which is next month, but next year. So I don't want to take too much time because sometimes, as you know, I just go on and on, gabbing. So I'm going to continue with the book. So you're now able to see me read it live. Again, it is on Amazon and Google Play and Kindle as well. So last week we ended on chapter 12, which was called November 8th, 2016. And again, I always say this and I have to say this because I've had people, reach out to me and say, well, how come you wrote this book? And what are you talking about? Again, it's not to offend anybody. It's just to shed some truth that, my opinion on certain things and things of that nature. So just want to put that out there, as I say every week. So here we go. So chapter 13. Bear with me 1 second. You can have like a song in your head and you just can't get it out. And then when somebody asks you, oh, what song are you singing? You're like, oh, I forgot the name. Interesting. Okay. All right. So chapter 13 is titled Rayshard Brooks. Here we go. This is CNN Tonight. And we have some shocking but not new news tonight for you. Another young black man, Rayshard Brooks, was shot and killed by police while running away in the Wendy's parking lot. Now, how many intros to a news station when you turn on the TV have you heard that line before? Not even just in 2020, but since Oscar Grant in 2009, which a lot of people either forgot or do not mention. People think the video recording started in 2012 with Trayvon Martin, who was murdered by George Zimmerman, but that isn't the case. There are probably a million recordings, the ones we don't get to see. The first one, after Rodney King, we saw with our own eyes, was Oscar Grant, who was just trying to enjoy his New Year's Eve with his friends in California. Getting off the train to head home, fight breaks out, and cops usher them off, yelling and screaming at them to sit down and handcuff them, by the way, and harass and mess with them. One thing led to another, and Oscar Grant was shot and killed right then and there, and so on and so on and so forth. We have heard so many stories and cases like that. You think, how can a cop do this? And how can a cop justify this as actual police work, quote unquote? But yet they do, and yet we just go along with them. We fight, we scream, we march and protest until we are blue in the face, and yet we are still here. It is 2020, people, and yet we are still marching, still protesting for equality. Now, there is nothing wrong with freedom of speech, but why must we march at the expense of all Black lives? You send out armed forces on civilians. You have unmasked and unmarked officers in army fatigue, harassing and taking citizens to wherever nobody knows. The force is unnecessary when it comes to handling people, when all it takes is just to talk to someone and understand what the problem is. Now, I have said it before and I will say it again. If the police would just ask questions and understand situations instead of shooting, we'd be off in a better place. Now, it takes a lot for people to change, although do people really change? They really just find a better way of hiding who the true self are. Case in point, your president. Now again, I just want to stop right here and say when I wrote this book, this was back in May 25th, actually, precisely, right after George Floyd was murdered. So a lot of things I'm reading, and even in the previous chapters, obviously don't match up to what's happening now, because again, this is back when Trump was in the office, so just bear with me. All right, so case in point, your president. You voted for this man, and knowing how he was as a person, his morals, ethics, and the way he thinks of people who aren't him, why? That is something I will never understand. And people wonder why cops, white folks, and hidden KKK members are so bold now. It is because you voted in a man who, in the way, believes the opposite of what a true American believes. Now, granted, but all of these cases, your president could have at least once tried and said that Black Lives Matter, not saying that they were good people on both sides, and the massacre of people and killing of the young women. That to me right there should have told you that something was wrong with this man that was in office. And we need to get him out, which we did. Excuse me. But yet we tried the impeachment tactic, but for some reason there was not enough evidence to have him out of office. But yet, when now Judge Kavanaugh was on trial with harassing Dr. Christine Blasey Ford, there were mounds and mounds of evidence against her. She sat up there, humiliated, receiving death threats, and literally scared for her life. Where was her sympathy? Like all these young African American citizens being murdered and slain in the street, where was their sympathy? We don't ever get any, because we are looked at as nothing, less than, not important. Our lives never have mattered, so why should they now? Living in America as a Black woman is exhausting, and I'm so sick of tired of being sick and tired. Now, how many times have you heard that saying before? What more do we have to do for you to see that we matter and want to be treated as human beings? Killing us on a daily basis isn't going to bring you that peace you are so desperately looking for. Neither is ignoring our cries, ignoring our pleas, ignoring our voices in the streets, in the ballot boxes, and in the communities. We have a right to speak on and act on what we believe, and that is right and wrong, just as the next person does. There is no way you can tell me that he was being aggressive or forceful when he was running away from you. By this I mean shot in the back. If he's doing all of that, why not just shoot him in the leg to wound him so they slow down? Isn't that what they taught you in those 120 days of training? You know, between the lessons of chokeholds and laying your knees in our backs, you wound a person in the leg or the arm. Countless times we have read or heard a coroner report saying that there was internal bleeding, multiple shots in the back, and the areas these shots were found in are from running away. So you can't say that he was resisting arrest Or the famous one, oh, I was fearful for my life, like the Karen at Central Park. How are you trained by law as a law enforcer with a gun, taser, stick, fearful of a 17-year-old, fearful of a mom with her 5-year-old daughter in the car watching you as you murder her husband, fearful of a young man who may have fallen asleep in the parking lot? Why not just ask him to move his car out the way? Check on him that he is okay and go on about your business. Everyone who sees the car stalled in the center of a parking lot line either honks their horn, or if you are not alone, you go see what is wrong. The first thought shouldn't be to bring your guns drawn to a man who's asleep, who will obviously be startled if you're banging and screaming on the window. That logic there in many of these cases is scarce. Rayshard Brooks was just another young man who just probably had a long day at work or wherever he came from and fell asleep like anyone else. He was not driving and falling asleep. He was not drunk. He was parked and probably just fell asleep. Did any of those cops, the people in the line, go out and see if he was okay? The cameras show you what has happened. And yet it jumps from 0 to 100 when the police arrive. For him to have fallen asleep is a human instinct. Shouldn't have cost him his life. For every black man you kill, you also kill their family, their children. No one ever thinks about the aftermath of the actions that you cause. The killings and the knees and the necks and the chokeholds. You're doing the same thing to their loved ones. In the world comes to a halt, and I mean a complete halt, when an officer is slain or injured. Trump comes out and says something and says what a fine man this individual was and how Americans let things, how America could let this happen. Cops, commissioners, and DAs have all sorts of press conferences to find the culprit at large. Everything stops. Things are happening in motion in our own play to find this big, black, scary black man person, as they call it. We are portrayed as thugs and degenerates and people who need to be behind bars. Our lives are not well enough. Excuse me. I lost my train of thought. All right. People who need to be behind bars, or our lives are not well enough, so you put us in the ground. Your commander-in-chief, the one you voted in, is quiet as a mouse when another black man is killed. He just speaks out on how fine the cops are or how they're doing their job so well. We don't and are refusing to hear that anymore. That doesn't give us justice, or that doesn't bring our loved ones back. Action, action, action needs to be done in this next election, which it did, thank goodness. And now the time to use your voice. Use your platform in the right way. Don't do nothing for another 4 years, and when November comes and he's still the president, you wonder why all hell breaks loose. Time is now for a change, and time is now to make things happen for a better future, which we did. So we got Joe Biden and Kamala Harris. And it's Kamala Harris, not Kamala or Kamala Malama. Kamala Harris, or Madam Vice President to you, sir. All these names, the list goes on and on and on. And yet they eventually get forgotten until another killing happens. And in the marches or the bands who list all these names, these individuals should always be remembered, and not when someone else dies, but when it matters, which is all the time. During the good, the bad, and the hard times. These individuals can't just keep becoming faces on a t-shirt or hashtags or even a GoFundMe page. Their deaths cannot be for nothing. Because if that is the case, then we are in worse shape than I thought. Love always conquers all. Answers and actions in the White House also can make a difference as well. But how can we make this happen? Why are all these men and women dying at the hands of police? It is 2020, and yet we are having to tell these cops on how to properly do their jobs, but to ask how to treat us, how to interact with us, and so on and so forth. Bottom line is just stop. Just stop. It is that simple. The deaths of black people by police are 3 times more than a white person by police. If you look at all the cases, shot 8 times in her sleep, shot 3 times in the back, running away from the cops to his grandma's house, shot twice by cops on his way home on New Year's Eve, put in a life-threatening chokehold while just selling music CDs, screaming, "I can't breathe." A young man, 17 years old, walking in this neighborhood as he has for 17 years, going to a store to buy iced tea and Skittles and gets harassed and followed by a troubled neighborhood watchman with a shotgun. A young man who is accused of paying with a counterfeit bill, allegedly, cops being called and he's screaming also, "I can't breathe," and yelling for his mama while having a knee in his neck for 8 minutes and 46 seconds. The list goes on and on and on, and the stories are more gruesome and disgusting than the last. What is the common here? Cops using excessive force to murder in cold blood a black man. On what principle does that justify killing these people over and over again? You don't have the right to kill these young men. Are you God? Are you their maker? Who are you to say it is their time to leave this earth? These deaths are brutal and angry, with multiple shots, choking forcefully not by one cop, by multiple cops. If the person is screaming, "I can't breathe," wouldn't a light bulb pop in your head and say, maybe he is saying I can't breathe. I do have the upper hand as I am literally sitting on his throat and lower back with my hands in my pocket. Maybe I should ease up. There is no threat that anyone can have when you view on their body and they are saying, uncle. They are literally at your will and at your mercy because you have defeated them. You have taken them all around now that you're here. Yet, when it is documented, when you are looking right at you, and when you hear these young men screaming and begging for their lives, you turn the other cheek. It is disturbing and sad to see that when looking at the force of the police in this country, it is so large it makes you wonder what has happened. What will happen going forward? Why is this still a debate of our lives mattering to you? Are we that underrated and unimportant that you think you can just do whatever you want to do with us? Sad day in America when life is so fragile and life seems to be at the disposal. When every life should matter and mean something. Black Lives Matter should not be a partisan debate. CNN commentator and former executive director of the Black Caucus, Angela Rye, has said it best. It should not, but yet here we are again. What this year and these past 4 years have shown me is this. There is no faith, if there was any, in the justice system. That when evidence is literally shown in front of you over and over again, we still get failed as a minority group. We still get asked out when it comes to justice, quality answers, and most importantly, progress. Whenever a black person tries to get ahead in the ways of life, there is either money, bills, jobs, loss, or cuts that hits us harder than anyone else. Why is that? Why are we always getting food stamps or trying to scrap and scramble to get our bills paid on the 1st and the 15th? Why are we always pushed to move to lower income areas to fit the status quo? Or your white America? We get shipped out of our houses or communities just so white folks can get moved in, and we have to go back to where we came from. The regentification process is insane, and black folks are always the ones who suffer. The rent gets raised, and we can't afford to live there anymore because taxes and the rent goes up. So the only place to go and where we can afford is back to lower income cities. And the cycle, as I mentioned in my earlier chapters, continues all over again. There is no growth or progress in the black community because we are given limited tools and resources. We are last to get looked at and the last to be talked to. They get around to discussion or handling the black person, just like during slavery. Again, was in 1619, not 1776, as what people think. We are given a little dream, a little slice of heaven, and then the next breath it is gone, like it was a lease. That is the problem in the African American community. We are teased with getting out of poverty and getting out of depression. Yet, when all we want more or want something higher than 2%, we get squashed or put back in place. Just like if a slave was on a plantation trying to escape to freedom. Living in America as an African American in 2020, in some cases, it is just as if we are still marching or sitting in the back of the bus in Alabama. What has changed, really? I mean, if you sit back and think about it, what has changed for blacks? Nothing. Really, nothing that is to our satisfaction has changed drastically, or even just a little bit. Black men are still dying at the hands of police, and police are still not paying for the crimes they commit. They either get death duty or leave or paid absence. But what about the families and the sons who murdered? What are they supposed to do when there is never any justice served for their sons, nephews, fathers, uncles, and brothers? They are no longer here with them. What do you say to the little girl who is Rayshard Brooks' daughter that she no longer has a father anymore? That she won't have her father to see her graduate high school or walk her down the aisle when she gets married? What do you tell George Floyd kids that no more daddy for Father's Day? No more daddy to spend Christmas with as the holidays are around the corner? What do you say when their kids grow up hating and disobeying the cops, just as if the deaths of their father just happened yesterday? You see, it is a never-ending cycle of psychological abuse against the black community. They give us the tools that we need to hurt us in the end. It is a never-ending cycle of black youth acting out in anger towards police brutality. Because when these children and others grow up and learn how their loved ones were murdered, that stays with you for the rest of your life. And all of that could be avoided if people were communicating more versus just shooting to kill. And in most cases, or all, that is unnecessary. But it has to stop with the death by police, the death by the knee of the neck, and the death of the chokeholds. One choice decision that is made can alter the aftermath drastically. Rayshard Brooks' death by no means should just be another name in the conversation. He should be something that awakens in the system. But in the course of the 5 months of quarantine, there were 4 deaths: Breonna Taylor, Ahmaud Arbery, George Floyd, Rayshard Brooks. This is nuts. Even in the middle of a pandemic, the police still found the time to act as if they're just doing their jobs. How could that be? How could there be 4 deaths in a lockdown? How could 4 beautiful people have lost their lives at the hands of police, and yet we are in August? Again, this is back when I wrote it, with no results have been discussed. What does it even mean to say about the thinking of our society? Because what more evidence do you need to prove that there is an issue in the system and that needs to be addressed? The lives of Black people are very thin line when it comes to conversation because it keeps happening, which tells me that no one has learned their lessons, police in particular. They have not gotten the picture that acting this way can't go on for much longer. Yet, cops still act this way and cops still don't get fired or a trial ever happens, and yet the cops go on about their lives. There has to be a time when they are held accountable, and not just for a small time, but for some jail time. Not once in any of these situations did any of these cops get jail time for their crimes. This even goes back to the brutal murder of Emmett Till in 1955, with 2 white men sheriffs, mind you, and there was evidence and witnesses. But yet, since he was a 14-year-old Black boy, and they were white in the middle of racism in 1950, they got off scot-free, as well as the jury. Like in 90% of the cases, we're all white jury. So the odds against this case were 0 to 0. This is the key to make a change in the system so Black children can stop growing up fatherless and angry. So that was chapter 13 of my book titled Rayshard Brooks. And again, for those of you who are just tuning into this live podcast, because essentially my other podcasts were just recorded. But for those of you who are just tuning in, I was reading, or I have been for the past 13 weeks now, reading from my book, Tajiri, which is here. A conversation on the truth, and I don't just mean the truth that they taught you in your history class. And I wrote this book. Essentially, I've been wanting to write this book for years now, but everything kind of came to full circle back in May when Rayshard Brooks was murdered, May 25th precisely. And since then, I just wrote straight for like a month and a half. Then this is out now, and this, to me, I dive into a lot of aspects of what I think the truth should be, with politics, history, slavery, the president, police brutality, social justice, all of that from my point of view. And again, the title Tajiri is actually my middle name, which is Swahili, which means one who's destined to be wealthy. So I thought that title would kind of go hand in hand with what I'm talking about and what I'm trying to, portray. So hopefully you guys have enjoyed it. And again, for those of you who are just tuning into the live podcast instead of just the audio, the book is out on Amazon and on Kindle, as well as audio on Anchor, Spotify Podcast, Apple Podcasts, and SoundCloud. And it airs every Sunday at 6:30 Eastern, every Sunday. And you can find it and listen and download and everything. So this is out now. All the previous chapters are out now. So hopefully you guys will tune in to this, live podcast, because it's a little bit different for me. I've never really done the live podcast thing, or the podcast in general. I've been more of like a behind the scenes type of girl, not really like right in your face. But I wanted to do something different, and especially with this book, during quarantine, kind of like a lot of reflecting, and taking a few steps back and figuring out like what I wanted to do with my life, as well as writing a book, working on my music, which I'm doing. As you can see, I am a DJ and music producer, so I have a project coming up. Stay tuned for that. And you can find me and my book and all my information on my Instagram Ed, which is Lana and Pure, one word, same as my podcast, same picture, so you can find me. And I have a main page, which is Lana and Pure, and then I have a business page, which is Lana and Pure's Corner. It has all my live sets and all my music and stuff on there, so feel free to reach out and check me out. I'm also on Spotify, Amazon, Google Play, YouTube, SoundCloud. My music is out there. And I was surprised I had, no, I said I had two, but I have one more that I wanted to mention that I have my new website is out. So I'm excited about that. And you can find that at lepentertainment.com. One word. Doesn't have to be caps. One word. lepentertainment.com. And that's my website that talks about podcasts, my music, the services that I do with creating songs and mastering, engineering, and things like that, previous sets and stuff like that. So please feel free to check that out. And I'll put that in the link as well too. So you'll be able to find it. Because I know for like me, you just want to click and go. You don't want to search. But again, bear with me with the whole visual podcast thing. You know, I'm not, some fancy person. I do everything, by hand in my room with one laptop and one microphone, as you can see. So hopefully you guys enjoyed this week's episode. Again, it's airing. The podcast airs every Sunday at 6:30 p.m. Eastern Standard Time, and it's available on SoundCloud, Anchor, Spotify Podcast, Apple Podcasts, Breaker, Pocket Tune, and there's another one. But all the links will be in the bio for this episode. So stay tuned for next week, because next week I will be doing the last chapter, closing chapter of the podcast of this series live as well. So hopefully you guys will join me for that. And then once I finish that, I have another surprise. You have to stay tuned for that. So you have to check back in for that. But I hope everybody had a blessed week and enjoy their Sunday. I know these days are going by so fast, especially when it gets dark at 3 o'clock. So it's never fun. But anyway, I always say, do something today that you didn't the day before. Never stop creating them again. See you guys next week. And hopefully you guys stay tuned for what I have in store.